Hello, good morning. This is BBC News with the latest headlines. The Duchess of Sussex has accused the royal family of perpetuating falsehoods about her and Prince Harry.
I don't know how they could expect that after all of this time, we would still just be silent if there is an active role that the firm is playing in perpetuating falsehoods about us.
The Chancellor defends his plans to raise overall taxation to the highest level since the 1960s as he faces criticism for doing too little to tackle inequality.
This is a good way to raise money that we need because it's a progressive measure. It means those on higher incomes contribute a lot more than those on lower incomes.
If you want to tell me your reaction to the budget, how it affects you, or any of our main stories today, you can tweet me at Annita_McVeigh or use the hashtag #BBCYourQuestions. Countries with more overweight people have had the highest death rates from COVID-19, a report says, as the government looks at a reward scheme to encourage people to lose weight.
I'm dressed up as my favourite character, Fantastic Mr. Fox.
And as children dress up to mark World Book Day, campaigners call for more books with characters from ethnic backgrounds. Hello, good morning and welcome to BBC News. The Duchess of Sussex has suggested the royal family has played a part in what she called perpetuating falsehoods about her and Prince Harry. She made the comments in an interview with Oprah Winfrey to be broadcast in the US this weekend. Last night, Buckingham Palace said its human resources team was looking into claims that the Duchess had bullied staff while she was a working royal in 2018. Simon Jones has more.
Meghan is making it clear she will not be afraid to speak out in a second trailer for the interview released overnight.
How do you feel about the palace hearing you speak your truth today?
I don't know how they could expect that after all of this time, we would still just be silent if there is an active role that the firm is playing in perpetuating falsehoods about us. And if that comes with risk of losing things, I mean, there's a lot that's been lost already.
This is a second clip released by CBS, but the first in which we've heard the Duchess speak. The interview was recorded before Buckingham Palace began an investigation into claims Meghan had bullied former royal staff. The Times newspaper has obtained an email written in late 2018 by Jason Knorf, the couple's communications secretary, to Simon Case. He's now the cabinet secretary. In it, Mr. Knorf is reported to have written, "I am very concerned that the Duchess was able to bully 2 PAs out of the household in the past year. The treatment of X was totally unacceptable." Buckingham Palace said it was very concerned about the allegations. Former members of staff will be invited to participate in its investigation. In a statement, it added, "The royal household has had a dignity at work policy in place for a number of years and does not and will not tolerate bullying or harassment in the workplace." But a spokesperson for Meghan said, "The Duchess is saddened by this latest attack on her character, particularly as someone who has been the target of bullying herself. She will keep striving to set an example for doing what is right and good." But the latest interview clip will do little to heal any apparent rifts between the Sussexes and the palace. Simon Jones, BBC News.
And let's talk now to our royal correspondent, Sarah Campbell. Morning to you, Sarah. This is the second preview clip to be released from the Oprah Winfrey interview, and it's quite something, isn't it?
Yeah, you could say that. And I think we knew, and certainly from the first clip from Harry that was released earlier this week, and sort of the ongoing narrative from him, that the press was likely to come in for criticism in this interview. He's made that absolutely clear. What we didn't know was the level of criticism which might be levelled at the royal family and the royal household. And I think that is why this clip is so indicative and why people at the palace will be particularly concerned about what's going to be aired on US television this weekend, because it does appear from that clip, and this interview with Oprah Winfrey is due to run for 2 hours. It's mainly Meghan. There's a little bit of Harry in there as well, but she will have a lot to say during that time. And from this clip that's been released, is she really saying that members of the firm, the phrase that she uses, have actively been spreading falsehoods, spreading lies effectively about the couple? And when she says the firm, is she meaning the royal household, so the sort of the palace machine, or is she going to directly accuse individual members of the royal family of spreading lies about them? That obviously is a huge accusation. But that's the point of trailers. We have to wait until this weekend to find out the context. It's going to be all about the context.
And of course, this interview done well before the news at Buckingham Palace. Its human resources team was looking into these claims that the Duchess had bullied staff while she was a working royal. What more do we know about this investigation?
Yeah, so this, this followed reports which emerged in the Times earlier this week that staff had complained about bullying, or there had been accusations of bullying back in 2018. That, of course, the year that Harry and Meghan got married. So it was while they were still working royals within the royal family. So those points were published, as I say, in the Times, and there was the unprecedented step, really, of Buckingham Palace announcing yesterday evening that on the back of that, they were going to set up an investigation into the claims which had been detailed about people that used to work for the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. And so that investigation is due to start soon. Former members of their household, people currently there, will be invited to, in confidence, give their side of the story. So, you know, it's a narrative. It's he said, or they said, she said, what's going on. It's a real kind of tit for tat. And I think it certainly exposes the division between the Sussexes and the royal family. And anyone that was thinking that actually, you know, it's what's happened, it's a shame, but relations are still good between the two. I think this is really putting an end to all that sort of speculation. And of course, what we also have to remember in terms of sort of royal family terms and the news that they will be thinking about at the moment, of course, the Duke of Edinburgh is just starting his 3rd week in hospital. So, you know, there's a lot for people within the palace to be thinking about at the moment.
Sarah, thank you very much. Sarah Campbell. The Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, has defended his decision to raise corporation tax for the most profitable companies to 25% in 2023. This measure, along with other moves such as freezing income tax thresholds, means that Britain is on course to have the highest tax burden since the 1960s. Paul Hawkins reports.
Billed as a budget to rescue an economy ravaged by COVID.
Can the country afford this budget, Mr. Sunak?
The Chancellor has promised to protect jobs. The tax increases loom, taking the UK's tax burden to its highest level since the 1960s, according to the Office for Budget Responsibility.
Obviously, the pandemic has dealt us pretty bad damage to the public finances and the economy, and I think I and the government have a responsibility to put those on back in a strong position over time, but do that in a way that is supportive of our economic recovery in the short term, but also do so in a way that is fair.
This is how he intends to do it. The furlough scheme is to be extended until the end of September, as will higher universal credit payments. The headline rate of corporation tax will go up from 19% to 25% from 2023, though smaller firms will be exempt. And a freeze on income tax thresholds is expected to lead to 1.3 million more people paying income tax, plus 1 million more paying at the higher rate. But there'll be some more help for hospitality. Pubs won't have to pay business rates until the end of June.
We have been open for 4 months out of the last 12 when we get to reopen. When we reopen, it's going to be gardens only and then restricted inside. So we're going to need all the help we can get to get hospitality through.
Labour talk of a missed opportunity.
So I just think this didn't deliver the scale of what was required. And for most people, what they're going to see is a very big increase in council tax, possibly a universal credit cut, and a very high level of unemployment, no matter where they live.
Although much of the focus has been on business, some number crunchers say the effects of the budget will also be felt far wider.
Much less attention was paid to what's happening to British households, and in many ways the year ahead for them is more difficult than the year we've been through, with falling living standards even while the economy recovers this autumn. And actually for public services too, further cuts to public spending mean that we may be seeing what feels a lot like austerity.
There is now a route out of lockdown, but tough times ahead. The Chancellor says not all his decisions will be popular, but they are, he insists, honest. Paul Hawkins, BBC News.
Well, let's speak now to our chief political correspondent, Adam Fleming. Morning, Adam. You've spent a lot of time since yesterday, I imagine, poring over the detail of this budget. And in terms of your assessment of it, what does it mean for the pound in people's pockets?
I think the best way to understand this budget is a story with 3 chapters. The first chapter is the government continuing to spend billions of pounds to support people and businesses through what they hope is the last stage of the pandemic, and that will last until September, when society is supposedly all going to have opened up again. Then chapter 2 starts. That is the recovery the government hopes, which will be boosted by a massive tax break worth billions of pounds for businesses to invest in stuff. Then the year after is when chapter 3 starts, and that is when we see the government raising more money in taxation. First of all, by an increase in the rate of corporation tax paid by companies earning more than £250,000 of profits a year. And secondly, freezing those thresholds for the rates of income tax, which means that more lower earners will start paying the basic rate and more higher earners will start paying the higher rate. And Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor, this morning has been defending that as a fair way of mending the public finances.
People's current take-home pay won't be affected by this policy, but you are right, and I was clear yesterday, that this does mean that the incremental benefit that they would have experienced had those thresholds continue to rise with inflation won't be there. We're going to keep putting up the thresholds next year, as we promised, but then they will be frozen at that higher level. But you mentioned the Resolution Foundation. I think they've also said that this is a good way to raise money that we need because it's a progressive measure. It means those on higher incomes contribute a lot more than those on lower incomes, and I think that's what most people would accept as a fair way to do what we need to do.
And the Resolution Foundation that the Chancellor mentioned there is a think tank that looks at people on low incomes, and they're doing a briefing right now with their analysis, which will be followed in an hour's time by the very famous Institute for Fiscal Studies. And it's always the economists' view of the budget the day after that tends to shape people's reactions. And in terms of reactions, the Labour Party is opposed to tax rises now. They think that would be bad for the recovery. But the Shadow Chancellor, Annalisa Dodds, is in favour of those freezes to the income tax thresholds.
So in principle, on that freeze, we're not against the freeze in principle. What I am concerned about, though, is the fact that this is taking place when we have got those changes to council tax, but also changes to social security as well. You quoted a speaker from the Resolution Foundation a moment ago who pointed out that actually, the government is planning to switch off its increase in social security, actually right at the time when we anticipate the peak in unemployment. That's not a sensible approach to take.
Labour are also critical of this thing that the government's got called the Towns Fund, where about £1 billion has been allocated for investment in towns around England. And if you look at the towns, the vast majority of them are in seats that are held by Conservative MPs, which Labour says is cronyism. The Conservatives just say is a product of levelling up and what the result was of the last election.
Yeah, 40 out of 45 towns receiving that money from that new town deal that's been mentioned in the budget, to be precise. What was left out? What's conspicuous by its absence, would you say, Adam?
Well, we're going to be dealing with a lot of uncertainty. So does the pandemic pan out in a way that's better or worse than Rishi Sunak predicts? Also, do we have businesses investing in the way that he hopes in the next year? And then also, can you raise as much from corporation tax as you expect? So there's lots of things to deal with over the next few years. In terms of other things that aren't there, what about social care? There's meant to be a big reform to how social care is funded by the end of the year. There was no mention of that. The Office of Budget Responsibility also say that missing is any idea of how to handle the backlog in the NHS, so operations and treatments that haven't happened because of COVID. Will that require lots more money to deal with? with education, okay, there's money has gone into these catch-up funds so there can be more tuition for pupils who have fallen behind in their learning. Will that require a lot more? And also the other thing that the Office of Budget Responsibility pointed out is if interest rates on government debt go up, well, then the government will have to spend a lot more servicing its debt, which could mean more interest, more tax rises, and potentially more spending cuts. And so when Rishi Sunak comes back to the House of Commons in the autumn, potentially for another budget and definitely for a spending review, where you'll talk about the allocations of spending to government departments, will we be going through all of this all over again?
OK, Adam, thank you very much. Adam Fleming, our chief political correspondent, and also spending many hours since yesterday's budget announcement digesting the detail is the director of the Institute for Fiscal Studies, Paul Johnson, who joins us now. Paul, morning to you as well. And I was just looking at your Twitter account recently, and something that you've picked up on relating to what the OBR, the Independent Office for Budget Responsibility, has been saying, which you very much agree with, is you're saying spending plans from 2022 include precisely nothing for dealing with additional pressures arising from the pandemic. And this really underlines the budget, doesn't it? This level of uncertainty, despite the fact that the vaccine programme is going incredibly well, because we don't know exactly what's going to happen with this virus. Will the situation be better or might it be worse?
No, I think you're right. There's a huge amount of uncertainty about the forecasts in all of this. We all grab onto the central forecast from the OBR and the central numbers that the Chancellor talks about. But of course, much more than usual, we don't really have much of an idea, frankly, what's going to be happening in the economy in the next year or two. But associated with that, and a slightly separate point, is that the Chancellor has penciled in some really very tight spending plans into his spending review in the autumn and into this budget, which involve actually spending quite a lot less next year and in subsequent years than he was planning pre-pandemic. Now, frankly, that doesn't strike me as being terribly plausible. The idea that we'll need to be spending less on education and health and social care and local government and all those things after the pandemic than we thought we were going to beforehand just doesn't look in the least bit likely, given that we know, I mean, just even for the minimum things like vaccination and test and trace and PPE and so on, let alone catching up with the huge backlog of operations and the need to catch up children who have lost so much school and the need to help local authorities and so on. These numbers don't look like they're going to hold.
And I was just asking Adam a second ago about what do you think was left out that you would have liked to have seen in there? What is conspicuous by its absence? Your thoughts on that?
Well, when I wrote a piece on Monday which said there are two challenges for the Chancellor. One is telling us how he's going to balance the books, and he's given us a sense of that. But the other is, what's he going to do about the big inequalities that have opened up over the last year? Inequalities in education, particularly it's poorer children who have done badly. Inequalities in employment, it's the young and those with lower levels of education who have done badly. Inequalities between generations. And once again, it is younger people who have suffered economically and older people who are actually, economically at least, better off over this period. And he didn't really offer anything on those. He didn't really begin to address the challenge of the economic inequalities that have opened up as a result of this pandemic.
And quite a lot of traction for this, again, something I was talking about with Adam a second ago, the fact that 40 out of 45 towns getting this £1 billion deal are Conservative constituencies. Now, I don't have the exact breakdown of which constituencies those are yet, but does that strike you as levelling up?
Well, I haven't looked at the details of which towns are getting which funds. I mean, there is, frankly, whenever allocations like this are done on a geographic basis, and this works also when finances are sent to local authorities, there's always a little bit of a political overlay on some of the marginal decisions. But I think, the key point about levelling up is even this sort of, and it sounds like a lot of money, but across a lot of towns, across a period of time, and given the scale of inequalities, it's going to make only relatively small and quite localised differences. I think the real challenge for the government here is that they're promising a lot, and I think people might be expecting a lot, but it's going to take a very long time, and certainly well beyond a parliament, to see really noticeable changes in those differences between local areas and towns.
OK, Paul Johnson, Director of the Institute for Fiscal Studies, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.
And it's 20 minutes past 9. The headlines for you now on BBC News this morning. The Duchess of Sussex has accused the royal family of perpetuating falsehoods about her and Prince Harry. The Chancellor defends his plans to raise overall taxation to the highest level since the 1960s as he faces criticism for doing too little to tackle inequality. Countries with more overweight people have had the highest death rates from COVID-19 as the government looks at a reward scheme to encourage people to lose weight. Let's stay with COVID because scientists tracking the spread of coronavirus say infections in England have continued to fall, but the rate of decline may have slowed. The latest REACT study by Imperial College London, covering the 4th to the 23rd of February, involved 165,000 people taking tests. The researchers estimate that levels of the virus dropped by 2/3 since their last assessment in January. Well, the MHRA says new coronavirus vaccines to fight variants like the one from Brazil can be fast-tracked through the approval system. The UK's regulator has issued guidance along with authorities in Australia, Canada, Singapore and Switzerland on what checks and measures would be necessary. Let's talk about all of this now with our health correspondent, Michelle Roberts. Michelle, good morning to you. Just briefly on that REACT study, first of all, we've talked to the director of the REACT study many times over the last few months. So broadly, absolutely the numbers going in the right direction, but a slowdown in the rate of decline, it seems, more so in some areas than others. Clearly, people tracking the virus are watching any of these changes, even subtle changes like this, very, very closely.
I mean, the key now is to keep cases down as low as possible. That's always been a strategy to try and stop the infection spreading. We know that we can't get rid of it completely, but the more of it that's out there, obviously for individuals, the more risk there is that you can catch it, but also the more chance for the virus itself to mutate and change. And we're already seeing some of these changes. We've heard about the Brazil variant and the South Africa one. This is why the MHRA, the medicines regulator, today has been talking about what the next steps could be to keep up the pressure on this virus and to fight it. We've already got brilliant vaccines that are working really well in the real world now, lots of people protected. But it appears that with some of these new variants, the protection you get from the current vaccine, although it's good, it could possibly be made a bit better by tweaking the design of these jabs.
So when they talk about fast-tracking, Michelle, how much faster are we talking about than, say, the production of the current vaccines pre-variant, because that was done at an incredibly fast pace?
I mean, it took 10 months to go from zero to having vaccines available, which was incredible. Now that we have that science, the new tweaks, if you like, should be even quicker. We're talking months, maybe 3-4 months to get something that's available. It's very much like with the flu jabs that we have every year. You can modify those. You don't need the long, lengthy clinical trials in thousands of patients because you already know that the vaccine itself is really safe and effective. So you're making minor changes just to make it a better match for the virus, and that's what we'd be doing with COVID.
And in that, there seems to be an acceptance that with the vaccine programme rolling out here in the UK and elsewhere, other countries, the US, talking about ramping up their speed of delivery of vaccines, the COVAX programme getting vaccines out to more countries, that governments don't want to contemplate, and scientists, none of us want to contemplate, going back to a position where we're going into a spiral of lockdowns, reopenings, lockdowns, that there has to be a way to keep on marching forward, including tackling these variants, whatever it takes.
I mean, so the vaccines are one way to do that. Also, testing is so important, and getting people who do test positive to isolate. I mean, that's why we've heard about surge testing happening to try and clamp down, particularly on South African Brazil variant and the UK variant that's got some other changes too.
Michelle, thank you very much. Michelle Roberts, our health correspondent. The National Institute for Health Research is calling for more volunteers from ethnic minority backgrounds to take part in clinical trials for vaccines. 7.4% of people on the UK vaccine register of research volunteers are from Black, Asian and other minority ethnic groups. Scientists say better representation in clinical trials will improve the safety and effectiveness of vaccinations for everyone. Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeon has insisted she had no motive, intention or desire to get her predecessor Alex Salmond, giving evidence to the inquiry into her government's handling of harassment allegations against Mr Salmond. She described claims of a plot against him as absurd. Our political correspondent Nick Eardley reports.
After months of allegations, yesterday Nicola Sturgeon had her chance to make her case.
I solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that I will tell the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Scotland's First Minister insists she followed the rules, that her government was right to investigate Alex Salmond and that there was no plot to take him down.
Alex Salmond has been for most of my life, since I was about 20, 21 years old, not just a very close political colleague, a friend, in my younger days, somebody I looked up to and revered. You know, I had no motive, intention, desire to get Alex Salmond.
This was a marathon session, more than 7 hours of questioning. Ms Sturgeon apologised to women who were let down by the government, but she insisted all the decisions she made were for the right reasons.
I have never claimed in this or anything else to be infallible. I have searched my soul on all of this many, many times over. It may very well be that I didn't get everything right. That's for others to judge. But in one of the most invidious political and personal situations I have ever faced, I believe I acted properly and appropriately, and that overall I made the best judgments I could.
This row isn't over though. There could be more claims to come, and a report on whether Ms Sturgeon broke the rules ministers have to follow is expected this month. Nick Eardley, BBC News, Holyrood.
Humza Yousaf is the SNP's Justice Minister and joins me now. Thank you very much for your time this morning. A marathon evidence session yesterday for Nicola Sturgeon, but the opposition say that she still has questions to answer. Are there any further questions the First Minister needs to answer in your view?
A ludicrous suggestion by the opposition. The First Minister was there for almost 8 hours. You know, that's longer than I think Tony Blair was in front of the Chilcot inquiry into the Iraq war. So she was there for 8 hours. Not only did she answer every single question, she dismantled all of those conspiracy theories that have been concocted over the months and years. And the opposition didn't land a single blow because their assertions are unsubstantiated. So look, if the committee has further questions, I'm sure they will write to the First Minister, but she answered honestly, truthfully, and that's why, for example, we have seen a huge number of people in the last 24 hours join the SNP because they have given their verdict on the First Minister's performance.
Well, we'll come back to that in a moment, but some people are saying that her account, some of her answers were muddled and inconsistent. Do you think there is anything more that she can do to address this? I mean, you clearly believe that she has answered everything that she needs to, but is there more that you think she can do to reach out to those people who are saying some of her answers were muddled and inconsistent to clear that up?
Forgive me, the opposition have already prejudged the outcome. You'll remember, of course, the Conservatives said they were going to bring a vote of no confidence the day before she had even given her evidence. So they had decided already before hearing any of the 8 hours of evidence that the First Minister had lied, she misled Parliament, she had to resign. So forgive me, I'm not going to really take many lessons from the opposition who say that she hasn't answered questions. She absolutely has. Every single question put to her, she had an answer for. She is
but with respect, are you prejudging the outcome by saying that she doesn't have any more questions to answer before the inquiry is finished?
No, because I have already said in my first answer to you, if there are more details that the inquiry wants, then of course they should write to the First Minister. They should ask for that detail. Of course, that detail will be provided. In the same vein, they have asked for further legal advice that we have to be published. We have published, or we are publishing those documents very shortly. So if there is more information, they need more questions they feel need answered, then of course we'll do that. But please, let's not take the baseless claims of the opposition who demanded a resignation from the First Minister before even hearing a single utterance of a word from her. And to me, they are just continuing with what can only be described as their concocted conspiracy theories.
You mentioned that large numbers of people have been joining the SNP overnight. Obviously, Nicola Sturgeon is very much tied to the campaign, the push for another independence referendum. It's been very much tied to her personal approval ratings. So based on what you're saying, this doesn't seem to have damaged the SNP so far. But do you think that the government system needs to be looked at in any way based on what we've seen in this inquiry so far? The integrity of the government system?
The short answer is yes. The First Minister was right to apologise. I also apologise for where the government got the procedure wrong in terms of its inaction. We ended up enacting it with a procedural flaw. That led to the judicial review and for us not proceeding with that case and settling that case and conceding that case to the former First Minister. That let down two women who were making allegations of inappropriate conduct towards the former First Minister. And for that, we absolutely apologise. But let's not forget, that is the genesis of all of this very sorry affair. And while the Scottish Government absolutely apologise, it's a great shame that the former First Minister couldn't find it in his heart to apologise to those women for behaviour that, of course, he has admitted to. In terms of your question on independence, you're right to bring us back to the focus of this, which is women who should be and must be they must be able to feel safe when it comes to bringing forward allegations and complaints. So there is work to do in that regard. In terms of the independence cause, you're absolutely right. Again, the First Minister, I think, is our greatest asset. She is head and shoulders above any other political leader in the UK. Poll after poll shows that. But actually, I think it is also the competency of the government. We have led the country through this pandemic. We'll continue to do so. And we have an election 2.5 months.
Hamza Yusuf, I am really sorry to interrupt you, but we are out of time. Thank you very much for your time this morning. Hamza Yusuf, Scotland's Justice Minister. And we have news now on the Duke of Edinburgh's treatment at a London hospital. News just coming into us. We can join our royal correspondent, Nicholas Witchell. Nicholas, I believe you've just received a statement on the Duke's condition. What can you tell us?
Yes, an update from Buckingham Palace in the last few moments from the palace about his condition. And it says this: the Duke of Edinburgh yesterday underwent a successful procedure for a pre-existing heart condition at St Bartholomew's Hospital. His Royal Highness will remain in hospital for treatment, rest and recuperation for a number of days. So a successful procedure for this pre-existing heart condition. This surgical procedure took place yesterday. It's been successful. It will remind us, of course, of what happened nearly 10 years ago when he had a stent inserted in his heart to treat a blocked coronary artery. Now, whether there has been another stent inserted or whether there has had to be some adjustment to the existing stent, we simply don't know. And I don't think the palace will enlighten us any further. But the important points that this procedure was carried out yesterday for this pre-existing heart condition, which must imply that perhaps it is something to do with the stent that was inserted 10 years ago. And he will remain in hospital for treatment, rest and recuperation, as the statement says, for a number of days.
And the Duke, Nicholas, is 99. I believe this is the start of his third week in hospital. Do we have any idea when he might be allowed to go home? The statement does say a number of days, but obviously the family hoping that he is over the worst of this particular period in hospital.
Yes, 16 nights so far in hospital. Initially, of course, at the King Edward VII Hospital. He went in there on the 16th of February, and then he was transferred to St Bartholomew's on Monday of this week. Very much, I think, in the expectation that there would be some procedure of some sort, because, of course, St Bartholomew's is this centre of cardiac excellence, particular skills and expertise there. That skill and expertise has now been brought to bear. This procedure carried out yesterday successfully, the palace says. How long will he remain in hospital, Anita? Well, we're told a number of days. I would imagine that for a man of that age, of his age, he's just 14 weeks, I think, now short of his 100th birthday, to have a surgical procedure involving your heart, I would imagine that he would need rest, recuperation and further treatment. We don't know, but a number of days I would have thought that certainly it will take us into next week. That's clear.
Yeah, and providing everything goes according to plan, I expect then we won't hear anything until the Duke leaves hospital potentially.
Well, potentially, as we know, that the palace, neither the palace nor the hospital are into this. What's the latest situation? There is never any latest, except insofar as they issue statements such as this when there is something tangible to report. So I would think that it is entirely possible that there will be no further statements now from the palace unless there is any significant change in the Duke's condition, or until such time as he is ready to go home.
OK, Nicholas, thank you very much for that update. Nicholas Witchell, our royal correspondent, just reminding us of that statement just released by Buckingham Palace, saying that the 99-year-old Duke of Edinburgh underwent a successful procedure for a pre-existing heart condition on Wednesday and will remain in hospital for treatment, rest and recuperation for a number of days. The Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, has promised another £65 billion of economic support in his budget, which he says will help businesses and people through the pandemic. He also explained how he plans to start paying the bill, which will push Britain's tax burden to its highest level since the 1960s. Nina Warhurst has been getting reaction from people in Redcar.
Every town and every city has thousands of stories of what should happen now. Bailey deserves a break. He trained for 3 years as a rail engineer before cancer treatment cut off his career before it even had chance to start.
I was trying to get a job with Amazon, but there's 700 people applied for the same job that I've applied for. So that's probably going to be a no-go.
Kobe dreams of being a singer, but times are tough for his mum. She used to be a special needs nurse, but stopped to look after her daughter who has complex disabilities. They just about get by on universal credit and her husband's income.
It's been a bit of a struggle here and there, because I think during kind of the first lockdown it was kind of people were quite happy to get kind of takeaways and things. So my husband's a takeaway driver, and then obviously that's not there. So his hours have been kind of up and down in bits, but yeah, we'll get by.
So things are okay at the moment, but do you worry about what comes next and what things will be like for the kids?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the kids are the future, aren't they? And it's not just about education, it's about mentally. I think especially you ask all the time, don't you, about COVID and about when he's going to see his friends, when can he hug people.
Joanne runs 3 pubs. She's desperate to get customers back through the doors, but she's worried about what happens if tax goes up and punters can't splash out. She's glad VAT's come down and thinks it should stay down.
One thing I would like to see is something that they do in Europe, and that is a fixed VAT percentage for the hospitality trade. You know, a country like Spain and France that does rely heavily on tourism and hospitality. We're in that boat now here in the UK, and a fixed rate that's lower than the standard rate that everybody else pays is what they do. In Spain, I think it's around about 11%. You know, for something like that to be brought over here in the UK, that'd be a great asset.
You know, everybody's going to have to adapt.
But Gary's hair salon isn't far from Joanne's pub. He was hoping he might have had a surprise VAT cut from the Chancellor.
We pay 20% VAT, where hospitalities pay 5%, so we're not a service that you can put online or a takeaway service. So when we're closed, we're closed.
The theory is, though, once things are back to normal, everyone will want a haircut, and so your industry will bounce back quickly.
There's no doubt we're going to be really, really busy. I worry for salons because they'll have taken out extra debt and extra loans, they'll have deferred payments. Those payments are all going to have to be paid back eventually, so it's added pressure on businesses.
Who are the real winners? Who will be the long-term losers? We won't truly know how successful the Chancellor's support has been for months, even years. For now, everyone's just trying to make it to tomorrow.
So what's the response been to the budget by business owners, and what support can they expect to receive over the coming months? I'm joined now by Laura Lynn Clinton. She owns a hair salon, Hair by Laura Lynn, and William Coe, Managing Director of Coe's Department Stores. You're in Ipswich, William, and Laura Lynn in North London. Welcome to both of you. Thank you so much for your time today. William, I believe 90% of your 130 staff are currently on furlough. Now, obviously, you're planning to be back in business, open for business, well before September, when the furlough scheme has been extended to. But does that extension protect some of the jobs of your staff?
Yes, it certainly does. I mean, the big thing about the whole pandemic is the uncertainty and not being able to predict what's going to happen on a week-by-week basis. So by having the furlough carrying on, it will enable us to balance our staffing levels to the demand that we face. Hopefully that demand will be strong from day one, but nobody can predict it. And therefore, that gives us that flexibility.
Yeah, because you're not planning to bring all 130 back initially, I presume, then?
No, not from day one. It will be a staggered, brought back after the last two lockdowns. After the first lockdown, it took a bit of while for confidence to come back in. After the second lockdown, it was a stronger surge because obviously in the run up to Christmas. This time, I'm hopeful that it will be a stronger surge because of the vaccine and people feeling more confident to get out and socialise. But the furlough gives us that flexibility. So if it's not looking as strong as we would hope, then we can just say to people, look, work a 4-day week, we can furlough you and then balance the costs accordingly to the revenue.
And Laura Lynn, in your salon, which of course you wish could be busy, empty chairs behind you right now. You have self-employed stylists and nail technicians in your salon. So what's the situation for you then?
Basically, one of the things I'm very happy about is that they are going to be helping us get back up and running with more grants from the government. And it's really also good to hear that when it comes to those that are SIESS or self-employed, they will also be able to get additional help. So that will go a long way. But obviously, because of the way we do work, we are going to have to consider the fact that we still are going to have to work at a skeletal basis. We're going to have to spread our clients out a lot more than we would have done normally. We're going to have to pace ourselves, although it's going to be extremely busy and there'll probably be a large demand for services.
And is there enough in this budget to get you through this third lockdown, given that you're not back yet? And obviously, all businesses have accrued a lot of debts during the lockdowns.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I was one of those that wasn't able to actually get a bounce back loan. So I wasn't able to get that additional funding. I was able to get the grants that were applicable to my business because I do pay business rates. But as for it being enough, I don't think we could expect it to be enough because of the adaptations we've had to make, because of spendings we've had to do, and also because we've had to also introduce PPE and other measures. It will never be enough, but it goes a long way to help. So I wouldn't complain. It would be, of course, better if there was more, but I'm grateful for what there is. But there is still going to be a deficit, and there is definitely still going to be a gap, especially for those that have taken out additional funding.
And William, obviously for your business as well, borrowing up, I believe your turnover last year was half of the year before that. Does the extension of the business rates holiday help a bit? I mean, I know that you think there needs to be a much more fundamental look at inequality on the high street versus online businesses, and presumably rates is one of the things that you would like to see sorted out on a longer term basis.
Yeah, again, it's the uncertainty. I mean, don't get me wrong, what he's done with rates is a huge step forward. It would have been nice to have been zero for the whole year because, again, it would have just helped plug that gap, because it is that gap. I mean, the losses that we've suffered and the borrowing that you've taken on just to try and survive is mammoth. But the high street pays a quarter of all the rates in the country. That cannot be right. And unfortunately, that's been an elephant in the room that's been going on, and the government keeps saying they're going to reform it and review it, but we still don't know what that is. And so therefore you're sitting here going, well, I may be better off this year, but what's going to happen next year or the year after? And that's what needs to be addressed. And still we have no answer.
That's an ongoing concern for you, obviously. Laura Lynn, in terms of the future of the business, I guess it's just about, focusing on getting restarted and staying open. But do you have these concerns about business rates?
Of course, because business rates for me as a hairdresser, I am on a high street, but unfortunately my business rates are at the lower end. So even though I'm paying high street prices, the grants that I got were just about able to help with the refurbishment. It wasn't even able to go that long away towards the rent, unfortunately. So having the grants frozen for now is definitely an asset for me. And if it was to be able to be extended, that would be a definite help for me as one of the smaller businesses on the high street. Because, of course, there's that niche market of those that aren't above the £15,000 business rate band, but yet our rents are in excess of £22,000, £24,000, £25,000. So, we're still having to pay a considerable amount when it comes to business rates. So that is a great help.
Well, Laura Lynn, I've heard you say that you anticipate there will be a big demand when people can get back to salons. William, I see behind you lots of suits. I know you do a lot of hiring suits as part of your business. Clearly, we're not quite back to the idea of big events yet, big weddings, the races, whatever sort of events that you might hire suits for. But how optimistic are you at this point, alongside all of those concerns that you've just outlined to us? Do you manage to hold on to a bit of optimism about what later this year might look like for you?
Yes, I do. If not, I wouldn't be fighting so hard to keep it going. The hire market last year, we did 10% of what we did the year before. It just absolutely destroyed. But, since the announcements of the path out of lockdown, we've had a huge number of inquiries for weddings. So I'm greatly encouraged that will start to come back. The other big thing that we need to happen is we sell a lot of formal wear for events, but also for work. And it'll be really interesting to see at what point offices start to go back as well, because that will have a huge impact, not just in terms of what people are wearing, but also just seeing more and more people around in the town and city centres.
Well, William and Laura Lynn, good to talk to both of you. Thanks very much for sharing your thoughts with us today, and all the very best of luck with your businesses as they reopen. Laura Lynn Clinton and William Coe, thanks very much. Now the headlines for you on BBC News. The Duke of Edinburgh has undergone a successful procedure for a pre-existing heart condition and will remain in hospital for a number of days. The Chancellor defends his plans to raise overall taxation to the highest level since the 1960s as he faces criticism for doing too little to tackle inequality. Countries with more overweight people have had the highest death rates from COVID-19, a report says, as the government looks at a reward scheme to encourage people to lose weight. The United Nations says 38 people have been killed during protests in Myanmar. Yesterday was the worst day of violence since the military coup last month. Security forces opened fire on large crowds in several cities across the country, despite growing international condemnation. For the second day running, Brazil has posted a record death toll. Let's move on to the correct pictures now for this story. For the second day running, Brazil has posted a record death toll from COVID-19. In the past 24 hours, 1,910 people have died from the virus. The country also registered more than 70,000 new cases. After the United States, Brazil is the worst hit country in the world with more than 250,000 fatalities to date. And it's a situation that experts warn is going to get worse in the coming weeks. Our South America correspondent Katie Watson reports from Sao Paulo.
Brazil's gravediggers are on the front line in this deepening crisis, witnesses to the growing number of dead, with no sign of any let-up. Hospitals right across the country are struggling to contain the virus. Some patients are being transferred to different states to get treatment. Up and down Brazil, intensive care units are full. Most experts agree that Brazil never really came out of its first wave, but the numbers are spiking again. and much of the blame has been put on the new variant, so-called P1, originally found in the Amazon, a variant that's since spread beyond Brazil's borders. President Jair Bolsonaro, though, has remained largely silent, only speaking out to criticise the media for creating panic. He's shunned lockdown measures and says people would die of hunger or depression if they were made to stay at home. It's a view that many people here share.
I'm worried, but we have a lot of physical and psychological needs. We need to work, we need to go out on the street and make our money and earn our bread.
With no leadership from the top, local politicians are taking measures to protect their people. From this weekend, Sao Paulo, the country's biggest and wealthiest state, will partially shut down for 2 weeks. Only essential services will remain open. Sao Paulo's governor made clear his disdain for the way the president's handling the pandemic.
Não é culpa da imprensa.
It's not the media's fault, President Bolsonaro, just as it isn't the fault of governors, of your opponents, it's your fault. Not only are you incompetent, a denier, but a pariah in Brazil and in the world, so have the humility to recognise your failures, your errors. There are Brazilians who've been buried because you weren't able to do your duty, leading Brazil through the pandemic, defending the lives and health of Brazilians.
This pandemic has become deeply political. Not only that, but the combination of the new variant, a slow vaccination programme, and no plan to steer the country out of crisis means experts are warning the coming weeks are set to be even worse. Katie Watson, BBC News in Sao Paulo.
Fishermen on Lake Victoria in Kenya have begun using some of Africa's first electric fishing boats. Battery-powered engines are being offered to tens of thousands of fishermen. Our Africa correspondent Leila Nathu reports.
Sunrise, and these fishermen are making their way back to shore after a night out on the water, ready to sell their catch at the market. These slippery piles are the fruits of hours spent scouring the lake. Some, though, like Sevens, have been trying out a new way of getting around, using electric motors.
There is a difference, because with this motor, there are fewer fumes while driving and the petrol engine vibrates a lot and the fumes get into your lungs. This is good and works well.
A new Kenya-based business is winning support here by leasing electric engines, designed to be cleaner and more affordable than petrol ones.
You can see just how busy it is this morning. Fishing is the main source of income for people living here. Their livelihoods depend on it. So they will welcome anything that could make it a cheaper and more reliable activity.
The company Asobo delivers the batteries fully charged to the fishermen in the early evening. 2 will power the boat for the entire night. And there's no worry about wasted fuel on occasions when fish are scarce.
I had a petrol engine, but the problem was it kept on breaking down. But with this one, they repair it themselves. So we can focus on preparing our fishing trips while the rest is covered by them. Even if we don't get any fish, it's not a problem. It's just unlucky.
So far, the electric engines are powering just a handful of boats like this. But it's thought around 60,000 make similar journeys onto the lake each night, attracting the fish using lamps. But pollution from petrol engines threatens the water they depend on, and their emissions are harmful too. Technological progress could now offer the chance for change.
Battery technology, storage, is becoming more affordable by the day. Appliances, like an engine, a motor like this, are becoming better by the day, more reliable, higher performing. So we think all these paths, they come together now, and this is a really good spot to start.
It's a risky and labour-intensive business to try to earn a living from these waters, but electric engines could help to ease the burden on fishing communities like this one on the banks of Africa's largest lake. Leila Nathu, BBC News, Lake Victoria.
As thousands of children dress up to mark World Book Day, campaigners are calling for families, schools and nurseries to have books with more characters from Black, Asian and minority ethnic backgrounds. Our Community Affairs correspondent Adina Campbell reports.
Dressing up as their favourite book characters.
I'm dressed up as my favourite character, Fantastic Mr. Fox.
World Book Day is one of the biggest events in the school calendar. But campaigners feel characters from ethnic minority backgrounds are not represented enough in children's books.
We don't see the iconic roles. You know, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Alice in Wonderland, all these characters are amazing, but they're white, or they're written as white characters. And so it'd be great to see more characters being pushed into the limelight so that they can become iconic. And so we can have more selection when it comes to World Book Day.
Despite a third of school children in the UK being from an ethnic minority background, latest figures show just 5% of all published children's books featured someone as a main character from one of these backgrounds. Over the last 30 years, children's authors like Trish Cook have been trying to increase representation.
There was no reason really why black characters shouldn't be in books. It's not something that's unusual. In everyday life, we take on main roles. We're not just the friend or the supporting role in a piece. The stories that I'm telling are universal stories. They're stories that happen to everyone. But I'm writing them from a point of view as a black writer to make sure that these characters get out there because they haven't been out there enough.
A third of children and young people in the UK say they're reading more during lockdown, according to the National Literary Trust. And some businesses have seen a growth in sales.
I get such great feedback, and parents DM me all the time just saying thank you. Like, finally my child sees a character and can, because I believe in that saying, you can't be what you can't see. And I feel like a lot of children now are seeing themselves as astronauts, as politicians, and they're realising that they can literally be anything.
For some parents, change has been too slow and doesn't fairly reflect the UK today. Their message is clear.
We're raising the next generation, the next change makers, the next business owners. And so in order for, in 20 years' time, for us to not be having this conversation, we need to make sure that we start now, and it starts with books.
Hey, Gruffalo, what? Say Gruffalo.
Adina Campbell, BBC News.
You're watching BBC News. Now it's time for a look at the weather. Here's Carol Kirkwood.
Hello again. It was another cloudy, chilly start to the day. And in fact, as we go through the next few days, we're going to hang on to a fair bit of cloud, a little bit of sunshine at times. There'll be fog in the morning, isolated showers, and it's going to turn colder, but it will be more settled and dry because this area of high pressure is going to drift across the UK and settle things down. Today we've got this weather front, which is sinking down towards the southwest, and what it's doing is introducing some patchy light rain, some hill snow, and some brighter conditions behind it with this northeasterly feed coming in. Ahead of it is still a lot of cloud, some of the fog this morning lifting into low cloud, but there will be some brighter breaks here and there as well. But under that cloud, temperatures holding up to about 9 or 10 in the southwest. And even though there is still some cloud across the northeast of England, there isn't as much as there was, so it's not going to feel quite as cold for you as it has done in recent days. Now, weather front drifts towards the southwest with its patchy rain as we head through the evening and overnight. There will be some clear skies around, and where we've got the clear skies is where we'll have the lowest temperatures, falling potentially as low as -4 in parts of the Highlands. So some of us will wake up tomorrow to a frost. The remnants of this front really just fizzle as the high pressure takes charge of our weather and sits right across the UK, keeping things fine and settled and mostly dry. So we start off on a dry note with a fair bit of sunshine, but through the day what will happen is a bit more cloud will build and we'll see that extend across many areas. But it will still be a fine day, a dry day and a bright day with temperatures 5 in Aberdeen to 7 or 8 in the south. So we've said goodbye to the double figure temperatures for now. Overnight, Friday into Saturday, it's going to be cold, frosty. Temperatures in parts of East Anglia, for example, could fall as low as -4. So a cold start to the day, but where we've got clear skies, we'll be starting with some sunshine. But on Saturday, the clouds are going to thicken from the west, heralding the arrival of an Atlantic weather front. This will herald a change in our weather as well. Temperatures 5 in Aberdeen to 7 or 8 as we push down towards London. Then into the weekend and the early part of next week, we start to see more of an Atlantic influence coming our way. So the weather will turn more unsettled, but it will also mean that it will become less cold with temperatures closer to average.
In the past year, people have been opening up about race.
This has been a really significant historical moment.
I've been travelling the country to see what's changed.
I've never thought of racism.
It's just understanding that this inequality is there.
And hearing people's experiences.
I just don't feel that comfortable in a lot of spaces as a black man, just in my day-to-day life.
Panorama. Let's talk about race. Monday at 7 on BBC One.